The United States has a homicide rate that is about 7 times higher than other wealthy nations. The vast majority of homicides in this country, as much as 70% every single year, are everyday shootings in the streets of our cities.
So 9 times out of 10, that's a shot victim. That's a gun shooting victim.
Violent crime has spiked in recent years.
Major cities saw a 33% jump in homicides.
Record for murders.
Although crime rates have started to fall, they remain above pre-pandemic levels. And many Americans are asking, is some violent crime just inevitable?
When people don't know what works, they assume that nothing does. And that leads to pessimism, cynicism, Blue Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter. It doesn't have to be this way. Violent crime is a complicated but not intractable problem if you follow the facts and data.
Which shows that in most cities, less than 1% of the population is responsible for 75% of homicides.
Breaking down the numbers like this makes a complicated problem more easy to solve. But we tend to adopt overbroad solutions: mass arrest, mass incarceration, things that have huge collateral consequences on the communities that we're supposed to be helping.
So what does the research tell us about what actually works to reduce violent crime?
This is Stand Together Presents, stories, ideas, and advice from changemakers tackling our biggest challenges.
We live in a complicated world. And the more complicated the world gets, the more we need to understand numbers, figures, statistics, data.
This is Thomas Abt, a former Department of Justice official and the founding director of the Violence Reduction Center at the University of Maryland. You might have noticed he's a numbers guy. But he knows the human side of violent crime too.
I taught at a public high school where one of my students was murdered. In one way, it's completely unquantifiable. There's no number that can represent the loss that family members feel. There's no figure that can capture the untapped potential of a young life that was cut short. But each number is a way of telling a story about dozens, hundreds, thousands of experiences.
Among these stories, researchers like Thomas have found a common thread that could help cities solve this massive problem.
Community violence is sticky, meaning that it sticks together or clusters among a surprisingly small number of people and places. Take Boston, for example. 5% of city streets account for 75% of the city's shootings. It's a specific housing project. It's a specific liquor store. It's a specific nightclub on a specific night. And we're seeing this dynamic in every city. So to solve a sticky problem, you need a sticky solution or a number of sticky solutions. Most people aren't violent, and much of the space in that community is not violent, and that's important to constantly reinforce.
In the past, cities have flooded high-risk communities with more law enforcement and policies like stop and frisk, which many experts say only exacerbated the problem.
We've witnessed when police mistreat members of the community doesn't trust those police. Because they don't trust the police, they don't allow the police to help them in resolving conflicts. That results in more violence, and that can be a vicious circle. But science also tells us when police collaborate with communities and focus on specific high-risk individuals, they can have a positive presence in control crime.
Cities are now applying these insights to develop a different set of evidence-informed solutions, and the results are stacking up.
The fact that we have had a reduction in homicides is really a result of the ceasefire strategy.
We can see how strategies like focused deterrence, when it was implemented in Oakland ceasefire, cut gun violence in half over a period of about 6 years.
Focused deterrence is a coordinated approach that drives the right combination of law enforcement and community supports towards the people at most risk of offending. Another strategy showing positive results is cognitive behavioral therapy, which helps people understand and process the thoughts and behaviors that can lead to violence.
In Chicago, cognitive behavioral therapy was able to cut violent recidivism among at-risk youth by about 50%.
Having a positive mindset, you go in a room, you change the temperature. That's what you bring. You are powerful.
We also have community-based street outreach, where we have folks who have credibility in the community actively engaging to intervene and mediate conflicts before they turn deadly.
Like in Dallas, where a group of former gang members is using their influence to lead neighborhoods away from violence.
For all of our loved ones who have passed away due to senseless violence, we're gonna do something.
It's important to understand there's no one-size-fits-all solution here, but there is a set of strategies that, when done right, can show real results. And it's up to cities to decide which of those strategies are right for them and how to implement them in combination with one another.
And Thomas says that because these programs target small groups of specific individuals, they don't require big budgets or broad legislation, and cost far less than the price of doing nothing.
Every homicide in the United States costs between 10 and 20 million to society at large. All of the numbers and human decency tells us that we have to stop the bleeding. And so to provide relief to people who are in crisis right now, we need to concentrate our resources, law enforcement, social services, and supports with the people and in the places where folks are most likely to shoot or be shot. Almost everyone who's picked up a gun was a victim first. That's not to say that this violence is acceptable, but we do need to understand it, and we do need to have some empathy for the people who are locked in these cycles of conflict. And fortunately, the science says that we have several different strategies that, taken together, can make a big difference. We're not saying that stopping violence is the only thing you need to do. It's simply the first thing, because if you can't rein in high rates of community violence, all of the other outcomes you want to achieve are going to be harder to realize. Think if communities that suffered from high rates of violence were more peaceful, were more stable, how much easier it would be to do other things in these communities that we need to do. We can have peace in our cities. The science is there. It's up to us to use it.
Stand Together partners with changemakers tackling our biggest challenges. To see more stories, follow our channels. And to learn more about how you can partner with us, go to standtogether.org.